My name's Lara. I am a high-achieving professional woman. I met my husband Axel at work. He was a temp in my department, and I was assigned to train him. Despite his constant mistakes, I found myself growing fond of Axel. Turns out he felt the same way. We started dating when his contract ended. Our relationship went smoothly. I was the stable one, and his carefree nature often saved me from my own seriousness. He proposed when he got a permanent position, and I happily accepted. We decided to get married and had a mother-in-law meeting. Axel grew up in a fatherless home and deeply respects his mom, who raised him and his sister on her own. I was looking forward to meeting my mother-in-law, and I remember having a hard time falling asleep the day before I greeted my in-laws like a child before going on a field trip. Greetings to my in-laws went really smoothly and without any wastage, and my mother-in-law seemed very approachable, and I had a very good impression of her.
I was excited to meet my future mother-in-law. The meeting went well, and she even said, if you ever need anything, just ask. We've got savings, lol.
The next day we met my parents, and Axel was so nervous. It was funny when he asked for my hand in marriage.
My dad's mother-in-law and said take good care of her.
My mom added, if Lara chose you, you must be the right one.
Axel was relieved that it went smoother than he thought. On the way home, Axel promised to make me happy, and I couldn't help but laugh. I was actually really happy, but I didn't want to inflate his ego. 2 years later, I got pregnant. Both of us were doing well in our careers. My company had good maternity and parental leave policies, so I planned to continue working after giving birth. However, my recovery was slow and I had to stay in the hospital for about a month. Axel visited me every day after work and even cleaned the house with his mom. Finally, I came home with our baby, Keith.
He welcomed us with a clean house and a warm welcome home.
I replied with a mother-in-law, I'm home.
That night, Axel cooked a delicious meal that moved me to tears. Life with Keith was exhausting. He cried a lot at night, and both Axel and I were sleep-deprived. Sleep-deprived? Getting a solid hour or two of sleep was the best we could do, even with Axel chipping in for the nighttime feedings every 3 hours. Eventually, it started taking a toll on Axel, so we both reached out to mom and mother-in-law for help.
The very next day after our SOS, mom and mother-in-law came to our rescue.
Mother-in-law took over the housework and mom looked after Keith.
For the first time in a while, we slept like logs. When we woke up, a feast awaited us on the dining table.
Apparently, mom and mother-in-law had teamed up in the kitchen and cooked up a storm so much that they even laughed about making too much.
We both teared up as we ate, overwhelmed with gratitude for mom and mother-in-law. Navigating the turbulent waters of early parenthood with the help of our parents, I returned to work when Keith turned 3.
Keith started going to a childcare center.
At first, he was so shy that we got called in a few times, but he eventually got used to it, so much so that I started to miss him. He was doing so well that people even asked if he had siblings, given how caring he was toward the younger kids. Just when we were considering a second child, Axel got a call that mother-in-law had been injured.
Rushing to the hospital in a shock, we found mother-in-law in high spirits, with a bandage lightly wrapped around her ankle.
According to the doctor, she had twisted her ankle by missing a step. It wasn't a severe injury, but she'd be off work for a while.
I volunteered to take care of mother-in-law. After all, she had helped us so much when Keith was little. It was the least we could do to repay her. That's what I thought. We'd pick up Keith, then stop by my in-laws for dinner. Our relationship deepened, and by the time her ankle healed, we were even grabbing weekday lunches together. We'd invite each other out using coupons or places we'd seen in flyers as an excuse. We lived a life far removed from the stereotypical mother-in-law and daughter-in-law conflicts you hear about. Then, just as Keith started elementary school, Axel lost his job. When I asked him why this happened so suddenly, he didn't answer. He wouldn't say why, and then he disappeared for about a week. We were still in touch, so I wasn't too worried. But then $2,000 started showing up every month. Whenever I asked where it came from, he dodged the question. I put the mysterious money into a separate savings account. When Axel finally returned, he asked if we could help Mom financially. Figuring mother-in-law must be going through tough times, I agreed without question. I sent about $1,000 a month to the bank account Axel said belonged to mother-in-law. Axel seemed relieved and said he'd start over as a temp worker.
So I told him layoffs happen. Let's get through this together, and we started anew.
That was when Keith was in middle school. I threw myself into work to support Axel, who had gone from full-time to temp. Naturally, thoughts of a second child were out of the question, so Keith remained an only child. Our nights together dwindled until they were non-existent. A few days into this new life, Axel started coming home late. He said he was still getting used to the job and had to work overtime. So I believed him and offered my support. Meals increasingly became a two-person affair with Keith. Around this time, Keith started to resent Axel.
Once he started high school and got a part-time job, he'd often say, "Divorce, Dad," or "I'll support you, Mom. Let's live together." But he wouldn't say why, ending conversations with, "Never mind."
I had my suspicions about Keith's attitude, but the biggest mystery was Axel. Just as I was about to dig deeper, a project I was involved in got the green light. I was chosen as a team leader and became even busier, so Axel's situation was left unresolved. Things didn't settle down until 4 years later. Keith turned 20 and announced he'd be living on his own from this spring. I looked at my cold, distant home life and felt a pang of regret.
What have I been working so hard for?
As I muttered this, a wave of exhaustion hit me like never before, and I collapsed.
The last thing I heard was Keith's panicked voice, "Mom, Mom."
When I woke up, I was in a hospital bed with an IV drip. I looked around, no one was there. I stared blankly at the ceiling.
"Doctor, how's Mom's condition?"
It's just exhaustion. But don't take that lightly. In the worst case scenario, it could be life-threatening. Please keep an eye on her.
"I see, thank you."
Hearing this exchange, I thought, that's Keith's voice, and looked toward the door, which slowly opened. Keith,
"Mom, you're late."
what happened to me? I came home to an empty house and felt dizzy while thinking how lonely it was.
"It's exhaustion. I was shocked to find you collapsed in the room when I came home from my part-time job. I thought my heart would stop."
Sorry about that. Seeing Keith's genuinely worried face, I thought, my mother-in-law isn't lost yet. I decided to ask about Axel, who had been on my mind. Hey Keith, where's Axel?
"I don't know."
But there's no one at home, right? Aren't you worried about Axel?
I said I don't know.
I sensed something was off from Keith's slightly angered response. I was sure Axel wasn't at home. I asked Keith, there's a place I'd like you to go with me tomorrow. Will you come? The doctor said I could be discharged tomorrow, so I decided to move back to my parents' home. After being discharged the next day, Keith picked me up and we headed to my parents' house.
My mom greeted us with genuine concern and immediately asked, "You're gonna live here, right?"
I replied, please look after Keith until I finish some business, and left for a particular place. Mom looked puzzled, but didn't ask any questions and saw me off. Keith wanted to come, but Mom calmed him down. I headed straight to my in-laws' house to find out about Axel's whereabouts. I called ahead and was told they'd be home, so I quickened my pace. I arrived and rang the doorbell.
Mother-in-law's cheerful voice answered, "Oh, Lara, you're early.
I spat a little.
Come on in."
I followed mother-in-law into the living room, sat down and began talking. So I came today to ask about Axel's whereabouts. Do you know where he is?
Well, I don't know either. I've left him alone because he responds when I contact him. He's an adult after all.
I see. I'll try contacting him too. Also, there's something else.
What is it?
I've been financially supporting you every month, but Keith is going to college and living on his own, so I'd like to redirect that money to him. So the financial support will end this month.
Wait. I've been the one sending you $2,000 every month.
What?
Axel said he needed help because life was tough after Keith was born. So I've been sending $2,000 every time I get paid.
So that $2,000 was from you? I thought it was from Axel. I've been saving it because I was afraid to use money from an unknown source.
Oh, Axel didn't tell you?
But then, where did the money I've been sending for your living expenses go?
I hate to say it about my own son, but I think Axel's been using it.
What? I was stunned by mother-in-law's words, but also felt a sense of understanding.
Maybe Keith's extreme dislike for his father stems from knowing about this, I thought, planning to ask him later. First, I needed to find Axel. I contacted sister-in-law, who said she had just found Axel trying to woo a 24-year-old single woman at her workplace and had detained him.
It seemed she was about to contact me, and we laughed about the telepathy over the phone.
I picked up mother-in-law and we headed to sister-in-law's house. We arrived and sister-in-law greeted us warmly. We thanked her and went inside. There was Axel, literally restrained with sister-in-law's kids swarming around him. He couldn't move even if he wanted to.
Sister-in-law took her kids out of the room and a conversation between me, mother-in-law, and Axel began.
What did you do with the money I sent?
I've been sending money to mother-in-law too. Where did that go?
Axel remained silent to both our questions. I took out a banking card I had checked the balance of before coming and pressed Axel further.
Do you remember this bank account we set up for savings when we got married?
Yeah.
Do you remember the conditions for withdrawing from this account?
For the kids building a house, buying a car, not for personal use.
You remember well. There are withdrawal records unrelated to Keith, the house, or the car. Mind explaining?
Axel fell silent again.
Finally unable to hold back, mother-in-law yelled, "Speak up like a man! What are you gonna do about what you've done?"
My husband flinched and finally started talking. To summarize, he had been fired from his job and was staying at another woman's house. He contacted mother-in-law to secure $2,000 a month in support. After a while, the woman got tired of Axel not working and kicked him out, so he returned home. After a while, the woman got tired of Axel not working and kicked him out, so he returned home. He registered with a temp agency but never actually took a job. However, he wanted money for himself, so he convinced me to deposit money into a new bank account for mother-in-law's financial support. I was utterly shocked to learn that he had dipped into our joint savings account to impress a younger colleague at sister-in-law's workplace. Anyway, the money he took was found by sister-in-law and remained unused, so I tried to return it to mother-in-law. She refused, saying, "Please give it to Keith as a college gift." I gratefully accepted, knowing that Keith's education would require funds. I also had Axel put in writing that he would refund all the money I had sent for mother-in-law, as it had already been spent. We agreed to discuss future matters, including Keith. Given how much Keith dislikes him, divorce seems like the only option. Axel was taken aback by mother-in-law, and we're now living separately. Keith has started living on his own, and I've decided to rent a small apartment since living alone in a big house felt lonely. After discussing with Axel, we decided to divorce. Mother-in-law was disappointed but showed her resilience, saying, "Our relationship as friends isn't over. Let's go out with Keith sometime." Living alone in the apartment, I'm enjoying life as if I've returned to my pre-marriage days. I'm already preparing to take full advantage of alimony through a divorce court.